Livestock News, brought to you by Santa Fe Trail Meats in Overbrook, or visit us online at sftmeats.com.
Welcome back. This is Ag AM in Kansas. Well, forage for cattle is at a real premium now, coming off of 2 years of drought in a row in the Central Plains. How that hay is presented to cattle in winter feeding makes an enormous difference in limiting hay wastage, and that does mean dollars in the producer's pocket. K-State Research and Extension Agricultural Agent in Pottawatomie County, Northeast Kansas, Austin Sexton, has actual research experience on this topic. Joining us now is the Research and Extension Agricultural Agent serving Pottawatomie County in Northeast Kansas, Austin Sexton. Austin has some good background in this area, for in fact he completed a master's degree studying this hay wastage issue while at Oklahoma State University. And so Austin, you have had a chance to interact with this topic, haven't you?
Yeah, I spent about 2 years raking hay and collecting data. So yeah, I've done a fair share of research in the area.
And we do want to dive into your research, the makeup of it, and its findings here in just a moment. But going back some 20 years, Kansas State University researchers, including colleagues of yours now, looked at this question, and some of those findings are relevant yet today.
They are. Well, starting off with looking at SPA data from Central Great Plains as well as the Upper Midwest, both of those regions, it's estimate that forage costs for a cow-calf operation are between 40 and 60%, and that's in a normal year. And so this year with the higher forage prices, that's going to be even more compounded to where that's going to make up a large difference into a profit margin of our cow-calf operators. And so, yeah, looking back, I mean, this has been a topic that's been looked over, some more recently than others. The K-State data that Dr. Dale Blasey had a part in was done in '93. They looked at processing hay into bunks with a bale processor that was PTO-driven, obviously. They also looked at that, at processing it into just windrows out on the range for the cows to access. And then they also looked at the standard unrolling round bales out on the ground. We had about 8% of the hay was wasted when it was fed using a processor and putting that hay into bunks. Then you compare that to the least efficient method that they used, and that being unrolling it out on the ground at approximately 23% wasted. So if you put some numbers to that, you're wasting almost a quarter of the hay you're putting out if unrolling the hay, according to this data. And that's with the wheat hay. With the Sudan hay, the differences weren't quite as big. It was 11% with processing in the bunks, and then again 22% with unrolling it on the ground, so that stayed pretty consistent. The waste went up a little bit with the Sudan hay, but that could be attributed to differences in forage types. But the thing you see there is that kind of the take home from that I get is a barrier made a difference. And so
of any kind, really.
Yeah, both the two, on-ground feeding methods were the most wasteful, that being processing in the windrows on the ground and then in unrolling on the ground. And then providing that barrier of the bunks, something between cows and hay, provided a little bit of hay savings. With the two droughts of 2011 and now 2012, more research has been done, including my stuff at Oklahoma State. There's been some more recent stuff up at Minnesota since my research came out, some other stuff at Michigan State. And all those have kind of built upon this initial research done by K-State and kind of taking it another step further each time.
And taking it into the area of using ring feeders and variations of that as opposed to bunks and how well those might conserve hay, right?
Yes, and that's kind of where our study at Oklahoma State took off. We did some polling of producers of Oklahoma, found what we were determined as kind of the top 3 ring feeder or ring type feeders that were being used among producers, and then also we put in kind of excuse the pun, a ringer of a feeder in what we called a modified cone feeder.
Livestock News, brought to you by Santa Fe Trail Meats in Overbrook, or visit us online at sftmeats.com.
We're back now on Ag AM in Kansas as we're talking limiting hay wastage when feeding cattle with Austin Sexton of K-State Research and Extension.
I'll just describe the 4 feeders we used real quick. The first, what I called the ringer feeder, was actually a modified cone feeder. And this is different than what producers probably consider a traditional tapered cone feeder, in that when you look at a regular cone feeder, it has a cone that goes all the way to the bottom, comes to a point, and has a bottom. This modified cone feeder, the shape of the feeder bevels in to where it supports the bale similar to a cone feeder, but there's no true bottom. So as the hay feeds, or the cows feed, that hay can continue to go down to the bottom of the feeder and feed out to the outside, and they can still access it, which has commonly been one problem that producers have had with traditional cone feeders, is that it restricts how well the hay feeds down, and thus can restrict intake of the cows potentially.
Plus, you looked at your conventional open ring feeders and modifications there with sheeting, right?
Yes, we had 3 different, what we'd call just traditional ring feeders. One was a traditional open bottom steel ring, no sheeting on the bottom, no individual stanchions. A very popular feeder in Oklahoma and other parts of the country was a polyethylene pipe feeder, and while extremely durable, didn't offer much in the way of hay waste or hay conservation, didn't have the individual stanchions, and didn't have sheeting on the bottom as well. And then we had a kind of the gold standard sheeted bottom feeder with individual feeding stanchions for each cow. It had 16 stanchions that the cows could eat at, and had a traditional 22-inch sheeted bottom.
Well, considering all of the 4 options, then again putting figures to your findings here, what were the differences in hay wastage?
Well, on a percent of bale waste, the modified cone feeder came in at 5.3% bale waste, and that was the most efficient. And that was followed by 12.6% with the sheeted bottom, kind of gold standard feeder with the individual feeding stanchions. And then the 2 kind of open bottomed, no individual feeding stations, the polyethylene and the open bottom steel ring feeders, both of them came in around 20.5%. And so obviously there's some differences there, and design makes a significant has a significant influence on how much hay is wasted.
So it's a major gain here in reducing that wastage. Producers will note that those modified feeders and those with the sheeting, well, they're a little harder to handle and what have you, as opposed to those lighter open feeders. But the payoff here in saving hay is much more compensating
Yes.
of that labor that you put in.
Considerably. And while these feeders with what I call the benefits cost more obviously than that standard open bottom steel ring that you can get at any feed supply store, and buy probably 3 of them for the price of one of these other feeders, the savings, especially in a time like now, that you can get from these feeders will more than pay for themselves in the long run.
That's Austin Sexton, Research and Extension Agricultural Agent in Pottawatomie County, Northeast Kansas, on means of limiting hay wastage when feeding cattle in the wintertime.